Your job is to cut through the noise. To succeed, you need to reach out to your target audiences in real time with messages that speak to them. You can't let technology get in the way of your brand. That's the spirit. First Spirit is a powerful solution that helps you effectively communicate and engage with your target audience. Get an awesome ROI. Success in the market means your message got through to the right people at the right time in the right way. And that's why you need First Spirit. Get started with digital marketing. Visit www.espirit.com now.
Everybody, I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network.
And I'm Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group.
And welcome to the latest edition of CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. Why isn't there another one?
Because people realize that you cannot copy perfection.
Here's why there isn't another one. Subjects like this, when to abandon your web CMS. That's the subject of today's show. Wow. Talk about a scary topic.
It is a scary topic, but I do think that it's on the minds of an awful lot of folks. I think there's a lot of people who are, it's the nature of this business that they're unhappy with where they are. I think that's the nature of people in general, but it certainly is the nature of content management, specifically technology. Everybody is always wanting that latest and greatest and worrying that they're on something that's not the most innovative contemporary platform.
So if you're new to CMS Connected, let me tell you what you can expect. We have a lot coming up in this show, as we do in every show. Scott Liewehr and myself co-host the web content management industry's only news commentary show. We're talking about that subject, when to abandon your CMS, and we're going to be joined by Marianne Kay in our discussion segment for that. Marianne Kay works for Digital Clarity Group. She's an analyst. She's passionate about the subject. We'll also be joined by Amy Martyn in our Spotlight segment. Amy will be reviewing Commercetools in this edition of the Spotlight segment. And we will end the show with our CMS Insider. That is my co-host, Scott. He's going to be discussing the Drupal 8 countdown debacle, if you will. And we'll get into that. But before we move on, let's thank our lead sponsors for CMS Connected, and they are, as always, Falcon-Software. Falcon-Software is a digital experience agency that can provide you with expert advice and integration solutions for all your creative design, content management, digital marketing, and e-commerce, social, or mobile needs. And Digital Clarity Group, DCG, is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process, and that is a process that is ongoing, and it's a process we talk passionately about on this show. So again, welcome to CMS Connected. I'm Butch Stearns, your co-host. Scott Liewehr is alongside. And Scott, time for our headline segment to get into our news items. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's get into it.
Time for our headline segment and time for the news items in the CMS industry. So let's start with news item number one, and it's a biggie. Dell to buy EMC for $67 billion, that's with a B, in record tech deal. So let's talk about this. Dell recently struck a deal to buy data storage company EMC Corporation for $67 billion. Now, the numbers are staggering, Scott. It's a record-setting deal in the technology industry. But let's talk about why this happened and what's behind it. It's the third largest acquisition in all sectors. It highlights the frenzy of deal making sweeping the economy as big and mature companies take advantage of low interest rates right now. So that's the business side of it, to buy rivals as a way to spur growth. But according to several stories, the deal should help Dell, the world's #3 computer maker, diversify from a stagnant consumer PC market and give it greater scale in the cloud-based data services or corporate data business. What's significant about this deal, in your opinion? Where do you want to begin?
Yeah, good point. Well, so you know, I've actually read a number of things about this, and folks like to say here that specifically that neither Dell nor EMC could necessarily survive independently. So how now you combine those two together together and all of a sudden you've got a hit. I'm not quite so sure. And I think the market's reception of it has been wondering about that as well, as they haven't exactly embraced this per se. So, I think you alluded to it. What this breaks down into really is number one, you've got Dell, who's mostly been in the PC market, right? And obviously, that's a commoditizing space, and they need to get into, as you say, into the data business, into the cloud business, right? And specifically, they need to make that transition from just kind of being the personal PC into the enterprise. Then you've got EMC, who's almost the opposite of that. They're in the enterprise, and I think they could benefit from Dell's entree into the consumer-based business. They have started to make that shift into the cloud, I think, considerably, but they've had their own challenges, and frankly, they flirted with consumer business with their simplicity business, and they backed off of that and sold it back again. So it's interesting. It's an interesting combination, I think.
So let me follow up on your point.
Yeah.
You're skeptical, as well as a lot of people are,
Sure.
that these two companies can come together and all of a sudden head in a direction that they're stronger together, right?
Yep.
Because they had some changes. I mean, let's look at Dell, for example. Mobile phones have changed everything. Their PC market sort of disappeared, right? They were the number 3 computer company in the world selling that. And now you look at the market and you've got IBM, you've got HP, you've got Cisco when you're talking about corporate data business. So again, do these companies need each other? Where do they hope they can go as a partnership now, Scott?
And I think they hope they can go up, both in terms of sales, but also up to the cloud. I think that's the biggest point, is that it's for everyone. You're hearing this from IBM, you hear this from HP. For everybody, it's a race towards a cloud, and frankly, a race away from that commoditizing, hardware business. I said PC, but I actually mean hardware business, because Dell certainly has a large B2B play, but it's about hardware is what they're trying to get away from. I mean, you saw this way with HP, the way they split their companies, and now they've got HP Inc., which is the kind of old printer and hardware business, and HP Enterprise, which is where they're placing all of their emphasis, shifting to the cloud, where their enterprise software plays will continue to be. And so that's I think this is basically, they're not the only ones, I guess I'd like to say. They're in good company, certainly. The question really is ultimately whether or not these two pair well together. It is a gigantic combination of the two. Michael Dell is certainly excited about it. There's another factor in here that I don't think we should get into, because I'm certainly not an expert in it, but it's a big play. It would be bad not to mention that VMware, which is owned primarily by, not solely, but by EMC, is a big play here. It stays, by the way, public. Whereas Michael Dell took Dell private a couple of years ago, the portion of EMC, VMware, will stay will stay public, and so that has a play in it too, and has its own stock offering now, and is a little bit separate. But anyway, I think it's worrisome, and most analysts have been talking about kind of reminiscing about HP Compaq, which is not a good comparison to be making.
All right, that's news item number 1, and certainly big news in Dell acquiring EMC. Now let's move in the headline segment to news item number 2 on this edition of CMS Connected, and it has to do with the latest with Acquia. Tom Erickson, the CEO, saying in a statement, at Acquia, we pride ourselves on guiding today's leading organizations as they digitize their business, and Tom certainly practices what he preaches with Dries and everybody else over there. But the news is that Acquia announced recently it secured $55 million more in venture capital funding. This is just 16 months after nabbing over $50 million in its last round of funding. Let me read you some quotes. The phrase, if you're not thinking ahead, you're falling behind, rings ever so true for us, and we strive each day to help our customers stay ahead of the curve and provide amazing digital experiences. This investment in Acquia, according to Tom and others, will enable our team to focus on doing what we do best, helping our customers achieve maximum business impact by delivering digital experiences that are flexible, agile, and of course open. What does this mean for Acquia that they just got $55 million more of funding?
Well, look, number one, I guess it's certainly a feather in their cap. I mean, the fact that they can go out and raise an extra $50 million after getting 55 not so long ago, less than 18 months ago, I think actually that was a part of Amazon actually invested in them, or actually Jeff Bezos was a private investment in them. So certainly it's kudos to them that they can go get it. But secondly, they needed to go get it, because since they've delayed this IPO, or the delay that even they were hinting at was coming sooner than it has, Since it's been pushed off, they need cash. I mean, this is a company that, like many, like the boxes out there, like those before them, as they're shifting their business model, you need to have cash to fund this sort of a business model where you are, in fact, in the cloud and offering the way that they are. So they're not yet necessarily in the black. They need money to go and continue their, frankly, phenomenal growth, but they've got some work to do and some money to spend.
In our CMS Insider segment, you're going to tackle this a little bit later, so tease us with this. But the obvious question, how long will Acquia stay private?
So I think certainly number one, the tease is that Drupal has taken a really long time, like 4+ years, to launch its new version, to get from version 7 into version 8. It's been coming for a really long time, and they've missed every single deadline that they've set. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I think that there's no way that they would have been able to come out with the IPO until that was out. They kind of had set that time frame, assuming that it was coming out, but they really don't control that date. And since so much of their product and platform and sales are based and premised on Drupal 8 being out, I believe that has been a part of this slowdown, certainly. And then look, let's just take Tom Erickson at his word, because I believe it's valid, which is he said, look, when we can get money fairly easily on the street for fairly cheap, then we're going to go and take it, take private money. Why necessarily go IPO if you don't have to? More
on Drupal and Acquia in our CMS Insider segment from Scott later in the show. News item number 3 in our headline segment on this edition of CMS Connected has to do with Sitecore, world-class context marketing at scale, according to Sitecore. We go to PR Newswire for this latest release from Sitecore. The full availability of Sitecore Experience Platform XP 8.1, the next generation of its flagship product. According to Gartner Group, quote, 89% of companies will compete almost entirely or entirely on the customer experience. To remain competitive and provide truly personalized experiences, business must understand the context. We hear that word so much now. And personalization and all of it, but the context surrounding every customer at every interaction, and then in turn deliver the exact piece of content or offer at precisely the right moment. With powerful contextual intelligence, Sitecore claims. Contextual intelligence, Scott. In one central platform, Sitecore XP 8.1 provides organizations with an easily understood 360-degree view of every customer, allowing brands to build deeper and longer-term relationships with those customers. What do you make of Sitecore's announcement about the latest with Experience Platform 8.1?
So first of all, you're spot on, Butch, when you say that we're hearing contextual, the word context, as it relates to marketing so much more, a lot. And so that's what this centers on for Sitecore. It's a big focus on that and emphasis on that. And I think it's not the first time. They've been focused on contextual marketing for a long time, as have their competitors. But I think the interesting thing here is the leap that was made in their statement there, where they talk about that 89% of customers base their decisions based on the customer experience. I believe that to be true. The very next sentence you read talked about, therefore we need personalized experiences. I'm not 100% sure that I'm with that leap. I'm not sure that one necessarily means the other, but certainly we are getting into a more personal world. We are having, as consumers, higher and higher expectations that a brand needs to know who you are and be relevant. It's all about relevance ultimately, and that relevance now transcends just kind of behavioral. Now it's really about, it is contextual because you are in a particular location, you did just come off of a flight, or you are out in the rain, or there's a lot of information and data that is now available to us, whether it's because of IoT or if it's just because of more information even through the traditional web browser that starts to be made available. But the more and more companies can kind of pull that together to be more suited and tailored towards an individual, makes it that much more relevant generally, and should hopefully help to improve that experience.
So I guess a final comment about their phrase, which I find interesting, contextual intelligence, because I look deeper at this press release, and here's what they bill, which gets me excited if I'm a marketer. Enhanced personalization, mobile integration, and a lot of terms with flexible and agile, so that I can use my same system, I can use the latest version of this, and again, contextual intelligence. Are you sort of in the show me state with this about that?
Yeah,
or?
no, I think when we talk about personalization, there's actually two levels of personalization. There's personalization that's relevant to me, and then there's personalization that's specific to not just to me, but to me in a particular situation, right?
Yes.
This is the latter, it's the latter part of that, right? So there's things that I like or don't like, but then even today, I might look to, one day I might be going, I don't know, to a restaurant because I'm taking my baseball team worth of kids. Another time I'm taking my wife and family. I have different desires, different needs. The way that you're going to market to me in those scenarios will touch on things differently. I find it interesting. I fly Delta a lot, and I flew up to Boston here this morning, and they talk about that they're the team of the Mets. But that's because they saw that I was coming from New York. I happen to be a Cubby fan, as you know, and I'm pissed at the Mets for what they did to us. But I kind of like to see the vindication that they got last week. But I could have been a Yankees fan, in which case I would have really disliked that. So they were trying to be contextual to me because they saw me coming from New York, right? But it's just it's another element that you can use. So it's not just about my own behavior, but it's also about specifically where I am and where I'm coming from.
All right, our final headline story, news item number 4 in this edition of CMS Connected, comes from CMS Wire. It's written by Virginia Bacadis, and it talks about the latest from Gartner and talks about the latest when it comes to enterprise content management. In the story, it is not, according to Virginia, business as usual in the EMC marketplace, and actually, according to Gartner. Gartner analysts Hans Kohler-Kruner, Kenneth Chin, and Karen Holbert concluded in a new Magic Quadrant report on enterprise content management, the market is consolidating, they wrote. But that's just part of the story. In addition, new and specialized vendors are emerging, but two trends they focus on: a lack of innovation and a growing resistance to vendor lock-in could ultimately loosen their grip on the enterprise. So overview, Scott. Gartner's thoughts about this on ECM. What are your thoughts?
So first of all, it is very true, and I think it's been looked at for a long time, that this is a category that just really hasn't had a whole lot of major movement. Certainly not from the quadrants perspective, but I think in general, in terms of from an innovation standpoint as well. I think I don't actually know where it stands, but if you look at one of those hype cycles, I'd imagine that it's fairly through down in beyond hype. That's for sure. That being said, it doesn't mean that there's nothing new and innovative going on. I mean, they allude to the kind of newcomers that are coming on, the Boxes of the world, DFSS in general, the sync and share, file sync and share, EFSS market is coming in general, starting to solve some of the needs. There's also business process management that's playing a role in here, case management that's playing a role in here. And so some of those are really finding new life, I'd say, in terms of new use cases for their capabilities. But from the standpoint of the vendors, and especially as it relates to the larger platform vendors, the IBMs, the EMCs that we talked about earlier, OpenText, that sort of stuff, there's not a huge ton of movement as it relates to their kind of core products in this category.
All right, and finish up with a comment about the market is consolidating. What do they mean by that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think all analysts can easily give a prediction and say the market will consolidate. I mean, it does everywhere, but at the same time, for everyone that's consolidated, you see something else new cropping up. And I think it's not that demand and the kind of nature of being contemporary hasn't changed in this space. There certainly is this whole notion of bring your own device to work, and BYOD, all those sorts of things has really changed this landscape significantly. So security matters. So innovation is there. It's just not super outright and obvious. I think it's supporting the more contemporary context has become more challenging for senior IT folks, I think. And it's changed with the times in that way, but it's not a lot of new feature function sort of capabilities per se.
He is Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network. Coming up next on CMS Connected, we will talk about our main subject, when to abandon your existing web CMS. You are watching CMS Connected.
HIPAA CMS, the content performance platform, takes the guesswork out of digital marketing and makes your content strategy data-driven. You can optimize your online presence by attaching business goals to your content and experiment to see which variants resonate best with your audiences. We build HIPAA CMS to empower your IT and marketing teams to respond to evolving online business needs and collaboratively innovate the online customer experience.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to CMS Connected. I'm Butch Stearns.
And I'm Scott Liewehr.
And we have got an interesting subject to talk about today, Scott. When to abandon your existing web CMS. And we're going to bring in Marianne Kay, who is an analyst with Digital Clarity Group. Tell us a little bit about Marianne.
Sure. First of all, it's a really great question to talk about, and I'm glad to have Marianne on the show. She's perfect for this discussion. Marianne is an analyst with DCG. She came to us from a competitor, but prior to that, most of her career was actually on the buy side. So she was the one in this role helping to select CMSs for her own organizations and dealing with the repercussions of wrong choices, great choices, all of that. So that perfect person for this.
That is the subject, when to abandon your existing CMS. And we bring in Marianne Kay, Digital Clarity Group analyst. Hello, Marianne. How are you?
Hi, Butch. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, good to have you here. So Scott did a nice introduction for it, but tell us a little bit about yourself. Why are you so passionate about this subject?
Yeah, so I'm a web content management analyst consultant. I help large organizations to select the right content management system and to live happily ever after. And Scott just mentioned, yes, my previous experience is with the other side of this story. So I spent 7 years in a large financial organization being a CMS in-house expert, advising the other departments and colleagues on all things CMS and leading the CMS selection process. Prior to that, I was with a digital agency developing a content management system product. And that's why I love being at Digital Clarity so much, because we have, as a company, we have this 360-degree view of the industry. We look at this variety of roles and variety of different agendas and perspectives in the industry. We work with digital leaders in large organizations, but we also work with CMS vendors. We work with service providers who help to implement the solutions. And we also not just work with those digital leaders who come to us asking for guidance on a CMS selection, but we also work with other customers who are perfectly happy with their solution, and we connect with them during research interviews. So that's yet another angle of the same story, and that's what helps us to stay objective, to see the larger picture.
So, Marianne, let's talk in general, just to start, about this question, when to abandon your existing web CMS. You've been in that chair. You've handled a CMS system for a large financial organization. What are some of the problems people go through? What are some of the common pain points that lead people to discussing a subject like this?
That's a great question. Absolutely. There are so many customers who are unhappy with their CMS system, and probably more unhappy ones than happy ones. It's when the system gets first implemented that people love it, because it's built exactly to their specification, the way they wanted it, and to their current requirements. But over 2 or 3 years, things change, requirements change, new things need to be added to the system. There are some workarounds, new modules or add-ons, or some hooks that make things work, and then that enthusiasm wears off. So
I think that's all. Those are all really valid points. At what point, though, do you see, Marianne? I think that there's an awful lot that we'll get into here in the next few minutes about the varying considerations when looking at possibly replacing your CMS. But at what point do you think that it's completely unavoidable?
Yeah, there's one reason when it's absolutely clear-cut, I suppose, and it's when it's a discontinued product. When you hear an official announcement from the vendor that that's it, the product will no longer be sold and the product will no longer be supported, that's when you really have no choice. And it is extreme and it is rare, but it does happen. The problem is, at that point, it's too late. You really don't want to wait until you have such a huge gap between where you are and where you want to be. You don't want to wait until you need to rise from the dead. Because those projects are then more risky and complex. And if you can spot the early signs of a declining product, then that's when you need to act. So when you notice that product is no longer competitive, that there is no active development taking place, that's the time to do a review and a CMS audit to see whether your product is fit for purpose.
And I'd add on to that I think even when, first of all, that's a fairly rare occurrence, I'd imagine, and it's pretty, I think it's telling that you say that's the time when it's unavoidable, right? So everything else is kind of in between here, and that's kind of the good stuff to get into. I'd say, though, even in that first scenario that you mentioned, you still have plenty of time to take your time, right? I mean, there's no, just because a product is no longer supported doesn't mean that you absolutely have to jump ship immediately. Take your time and find the right solution. I guess I'd ask you, though, what are some of those, do you see these replacements happening for the wrong reasons?
Oh yes, we do see them happening for the wrong reasons too. It's so easy to blame the tools, isn't it? And it's particularly clear that the CMS replacement is happening for the wrong reason when organizations are trying to do exactly the same thing with a different platform, with a new technology. So it just begs the question, why the replacement? Why the cost and expense of moving to where you already were? So an example of that would be personalization. If you are interested to personalize the content, then just purchasing technology that supports that is not enough. There must be someone in the organization who will be dedicated to that role of producing more content and thinking about these personalization rules that will work, that will make it successful. So the organization needs to be aware of the change management aspect as well as the technical aspect of the project.
We're talking with Mary Ann Kay of Digital Clarity Group, and we're talking about that particular subject right there, when to abandon your CMS platform. A very difficult question, Mary Ann. So let's give some tips, some advice to our audience, if you will. How can organizations justify the move to a different platform? What tips do you have or you can give them to put a business case together for a CMS replacement? Because this is a major decision. If I'm going to sit at the table and talk with my other C-level executives and my boss, I mean, I need to have a plan here, don't I?
Oh, absolutely. CMS replacements are so costly and they're so time-consuming, and that's why they are so difficult to sell to senior management. So you're taking, Butch, that critical point of view that senior management often takes, because the way it might come across is that you're fixing some back-end issues that no one will notice, that have no impact on the bottom line, and in order to do that, you need to spend months of development time and then freeze the content publishing process and minimize the updates so that you can actually move that with the minimal disruption, move all the web presence to a different platform. And that's just a disruption to the normal day-to-day operations, and without very clear benefits, it's extremely difficult to get funding for a project like that. And on top of that, you don't just need the funding for the initial project, but also for the maintenance, for the support part of that. So business cases are very hard, but they're the hardest when senior management is absolutely fixated on ROI, on return on investment, on exact figures that prove that what we put in, we will get back at some point. And CMS replacements are just complex projects. They cannot be seen like that. They're more like moving to a new office. It has benefits, but they're complex. And if you have some underlying problems, then the new office might not solve them. If you have unproductive people and poor performance issues, then all of those can migrate to the new office anyway. So it's complex, and benefits are not very easy to calculate, and it's not easy to put an exact figure on a project like that. So what should you do? How can you convince the top management? The tip is really, the major advice is really simple. Just need to align it with business goals. There's no other way. Even if you're in that desperate situation that we mentioned in the beginning of the show where the product is discontinued, even then you still need to align it to business goals, because otherwise you'll just be stuck with that dead horse for years to come, and you'll be arranging visits to other companies to see how they ride dead horses, and you'll be hiring outside contractors to ride the dead horse. Absolutely linked to business goals is the major advice.
So Scott, comment on what Marianne just said there, aligning it with business goals. To me, one of the biggest challenges here is that when you get in that discussion, whether it's you and the CEO, or you have all the other C-level executives, we all know that everybody wants a one-stop solution. You got e-commerce, you got social media to think about, you've got your CRM system. I mean, we all know the buzzwords, and we all know the problems people are trying to solve. But follow up on what Marianne said. How do you align it with business goals? Is it all the business goals?
No, I think it's valid to basically say pick your business goal. For example, a lot of the talk today is on, and we've had a lot of talk on this show, about customer experience and about how customer experience is really separating men from the boys, and that 89% of buyers out there are choosing organizations to work with or to buy from based on their service and their experience with services. And so therefore, many people are rallying around, and you see all sorts, Butch, of different categories of technology hitching to this customer experience wagon, right? Saying that some particular solution is going to help you improve the customer experience. It is an example, though. We see it in, I think it's somewhere around 80, I don't want to misquote the numbers, but in about 4 out of 5 top Fortune 500 organizations, it is a top 3 goal, customer experiences, and it is the top #1 goal in about 30% of them. So finding that, maybe as an example, but finding a particular goal, whether it's customer experience or any, finding a top goal that you can align your project to and help then, so that way you don't necessarily have to make it an ROI play. It can be just based on how are you going to help, how is that going to help the organization achieve that, whether it becomes more customer centric in terms of its commerce, in terms of its, maybe it is putting more aligned products and cross-selling products together, and you're bringing your commerce and content play together. There might be a number of ways that you can talk about personalizing content and rallying around the consumer and their needs and that sort of stuff. There's a lot of ways that you can do to kind of hitch your wagon to one of those particular objectives. Again, customer experience doesn't have to be the one, but I do think it's really good advice to go pick out that top-level strategic goal and align your project around that.
So Marianne, your thoughts about what Scott just said. I mean, are you focusing on one particular goal? You got to start somewhere with your bosses, right?
That's right. It's just speaking the same language, isn't it? Trying to find that common language. So rather than saying that I can't publish pages in this manner, or I can't deploy files or something like that, you can say that our products cannot be on sale as quickly. We can't respond to the market changes quickly. We can't launch new product lines quickly because of this and the other, and they are not personalized. So we are marketing the wrong product to the wrong person.
And Marianne, there is so much, I mean, as analysts in this space, we both know really well that there is so much going on in terms of acquisitions, whether it is CMS vendors buying other CMS vendors, it's CMS vendors being acquired by other, even categorical, different category vendors, or even private equity and new money firms coming in and taking over. At what point is it, I mean, is that an indicator to you that a shift is required when your vendors is acquired, or no?
Oh yes, when it's your CMS that is acquired, people usually just jump and think, "Oh yikes! What do we do?" But actually, in web content management industry, it's a fact of life. It's very common, and about a third of all leading WCM systems are results of past acquisitions. So if we think of leading famous names like Adobe acquired Day Software, Oracle acquired Fatwire. All of these names have some acquisitions in their history behind them. But acquisitions happen for different reasons, and not all acquisitions are bad for customers long term. But it's just always the case that it's a concern for customers. Very often that's because of the communications between the vendor and their customers, that at that point around the acquisition is not great. The communications are difficult, the vendors can be under NDA, some rumors are leaking, and the messages aren't clear. And that just feeds that anxiety and concerns that customers have about the future of the product. So if your CMS product has been acquired, it's not always that you don't always have to switch to a different solution, but it's always a good idea to do a CMS audit. It's like a natural point, a natural time when it makes sense to review whether that product is still fit for purpose and whether you want to stay with that CMS vendor for a long haul. And to really understand whether you should consider new alternatives or whether acquisition is not bad news in that particular case. There are lots of questions that you can ask the vendor, the service provider, if you're working with a service provider to implement the solution. But actually, also you can ask questions yourself. The organization can ask questions about when did the last strategic review take place? How does the new strategic direction impact requirements for CMS? Those normal, standard CMS audit questions that help determine whether the CMS that was chosen a while ago still meets your needs now and going into the future.
Mary Kay is an analyst with Digital Clarity Group. I'm Butch Stearns. Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group is alongside. We're discussing that often painful question, when to abandon your existing CMS. Often it is a painful question, right? When you do this, why are we seeing, as an overview, Scott, before we wrap this up, why are we seeing this? Why are we seeing people examine to abandon their CMS or amend their CMS system? What's happening in the industry?
Look, I think that technology, first of all, is given a lot of credit when it comes to controlling the kind of from a market, both from a marketing standpoint, from a human factors and efficiency standpoint. A lot of organizations, they want to be able to buy the answer, right, to some of these things. They want to be able to buy their way into a better customer experience. They want to be able to buy their way into being able to cross-selling merchandise. They want to buy their way into employee efficiency. And so I think this is nothing new, and it's also nothing specific to the web CMS category of technology that this is happening. These are always being re-examined. But I'll say that there are two kind of main deltas, I think, in general, Butch, between where there's kind of customer discontent. The first one is between what the product vendors say that they can do and what they can actually do. There's a bit there, right? And that's just marketing. I think that's in any category, that's in any besides technology, there's difference between what marketers say that their products can do and what they can actually do. The much bigger delta, though, is between what the products can actually do and what customers actually do with them, which is usually a far wider gap. And that's why we at Digital Clarity Groups focus so much time and effort as well on the service providers that Mary Ann just mentioned, right? Because they're the ones who tend to fill in that gap. They're the ones that help organizations identify a strategy that's going to get them from where they are to where they'd like to be, and whether that is extremely dependent on the technology or not as dependent on the technology. And oftentimes when things fail, when organizations don't get where they'd like to be or where they feel they were promised to be, the first place that they point the finger at is back at that technology, that was the fault, right? They don't look necessarily at their own, into their own house. Like, did they do the wrong things? Is their strategy very well executed? Was the implementation very well done? Did they focus on finding that right partner to implement?
Does it integrate across silos within their organization? Are people trained on the system?
That's right. Are they trained at all? That's a very good point. Did they do that kind of notion of organizational change where all the parties that were involved in this decision really bought into it? Or are there some kind of people out there blocking this and making it?
No, it's the fault of my CMS system. It has to be. I spent all this money on it, right? Mary Ann, let's ask you this question. Again, from an industry perspective, the question is, what is the shelf life of a CMS? How often are organizations replacing their content management systems? And again, if I'm involved in an organization or I have my clients, this is a question, I guess, from an overview perspective, I'm interested in. Are other people in the same boat? Are these being replaced left and right? Do I have a legacy system that I need to blow up here?
Yeah, well, a lot of organizations go on to use the same platform for many years, so there isn't an expiry date to speak of necessarily. But those customers who come to us for guidance on CMS selections, they have been using their systems for about 5 to 7 years, and that can be for two primary reasons. One could be that it was wrong to start with, and that is fairly rare, but it happens sometimes that the technology is a poor fit from the very start. And then it takes 2 or 3 years to understand the system and to get comfortable with it, and then 2 or 3 years to validate that, yes, indeed, it was a wrong fit and we are better off investing into a replacement. But what happens much more often is that organizations change and grow, and their needs and requirements change as well. So what was the right fit 5 or 7 years ago is no longer a good fit anymore, 5 or 7 years after that selection has taken place. And what we advise is, despite that 5-7 years average, review your technology choice at least every 2-3 years. Change is healthy. When your requirements change, that's normal, that's human, and there's nothing wrong about that. And evaluating whether your technology is still a good fit as you go along is a good thing.
And I think the point that you made earlier, that any shift is fairly, Butch, it's fairly disruptive, right? And so there's no really easy, clear path there, right away. It's going to take some time. Not only the process of making the right choice is going to take quite some time, but then once you've made that choice, going through the procurement and then shifting over and migrating content, all that, it's a long haul. And so I think some of the best advice might be, if you are going through this, to make sure that when you are picking that replacement technology, that you're not picking it for what it offers today, but rather its kind of trajectory, because there will be far many more features that have come out about it, and it'll be a different product almost by the time it's actually implemented from the time that you're making the choice. So I think it's a great subject, and appreciate Marianne.
Marianne, thanks for your time so much, and thanks for being a part of this edition of CMS Connected.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, Marianne Kay of Digital Clarity Group. So, Scott, a final quick thought about this. I would imagine a comforting and both a challenging thought for organizations, that if you've come to the point where all signs point to it's time to abandon the current system we have, and we have to do it. You might be scared, both financially, both training, but what you have to do. But when you take that step back, so to speak, you're going to take steps forward, aren't you?
Yeah, I think you really are. And I think I really liked her analogy about the whole office thing in terms of justifying it, that there's a lot of good reasons to make that move. Sometimes you are just outgrowing your existing one, and that's natural and happens. I think we want to provide caution about placing too much blame on the technology and looking at how we can improve things. But nonetheless, like she says, there definitely are times that you're going to need to make that jump. And the good news is that there's an awful lot of good activity and great products in the space. So if you are looking to make the jump, then there's certainly plenty to choose from.
All right, he's Scott Liewehr. I'm Butch Stearns. You are watching CMS Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show.
So you've got a great website. Your marketing team spends hours driving visitors to it and nurturing them into leads. And your sales team spends hours collecting, qualifying, organizing, and chasing those leads. Sales wants to focus on what they do best, selling. And marketing wants to get on with what they do best, creating innovative campaigns. But how do you make both teams happy? The solution is marketing automation.
All right, welcome back to CMS Connected. Time for our Spotlight segment on this edition now. And for that, as usual, we bring in Amy Martyn from Falcon-Software. Hello, Amy.
Hi, Butch. How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Great to see you. So in this segment, we're going to be reviewing commercetools. You're excited about this company, aren't you?
Yes, I'm really excited about this platform. And I'm really going to try not to sound too salesy, but I'll give it my best shot.
All right, so let me tell people a little bit about commercetools before you get into it. They are a provider of individually customizable e-commerce solutions as platform as a service for mail order operations, online shops, mobile e-commerce apps, retailers, and manufacturers. They work with companies like Red Bull, Brita, Airfield, and more. They were formed in 2006 in Munich, Germany. In 2013, commercetools launched the first and leading e-commerce platform as a service called the commercetools platform. Tell us more about commercetools, Amy. What do you want to highlight about them?
Right. Well, there's so many things I want to highlight about them, but just to give you a little bit more of their background, like you had said, they started in 2006 from the CEO and the managing director. And they've partnered because it started with a deep frustration of how e-commerce platforms were built and used, and how there's so much hassle and complexities and limitations and high prices that they really wanted to change that. So they went about doing some R&D, developing a platform. They had a license with Hybris, and then they kind of morphed into a multi-tenant version of that and moved all their clients over to the new platform called the commercetools platform in 2013, like you said. And so since then, they've really developed their footprint. They're now in Munich, Germany, in Berlin, and also New York, and are sitting about 90 employees in their total organization. So, and where they're trying to really expand right now is in more of the US marketplace, more so than Europe, because it's so much more of a CMS-driven marketplace. So right now they have integration started already with Drupal, Content Flow, just became a Sitecore partner, and are looking at building a stronger relationship with Acquia. So they really focus on experience-driven commerce or content-driven commerce. If you look at a traditional e-commerce platforms, they're really rigid and they're complex, and they wanted to get away from that. They really want to help the end user, the customer, find their end result really easily. So the part that's really exciting is they're one platform, one API, which is incredible. Pure play web store to omni-channel infrastructure, which just means so much more personalization, which is just where it's at right now. Customers really should be the center, the focus, as they're directing the platform. Really, the customer should be in charge, and that's really what this company is thinking about, really satisfying the customer's needs. So it's really exciting.
So Amy, a company like commercetools clearly going to be strong in retail, but is retail the only industry that they focus on?
No, not at all. They deal with a lot of clients that are in the retail industry, but they also deal with clients that are in B2B, and their clients also deal with B2C. So it's really an omni-channel infrastructure.
Their biggest competitors. Who are commercetools' biggest competitors?
So their biggest competitors in the US marketplace, their main one is really Demandware. If you're looking more in the UK, European-based, it's Mozu. But they also still deal with Oracle, the new cloud offering, to a lesser extent.
So you're watching CMS-Connected. I'm Butch Stearns. Amy Martyn of Falcon-Software is contributing in this Spotlight segment, and we're reviewing commercetools. Amy, let's talk about, in your opinion, what are the three differentiating factors, or what are some of the differentiating factors that commercetools builds that they have?
Right, so this is where it gets so exciting. These are kind of the juicy details that really make this company stand out. So I'm going to try to give it in 3. I might go into 4 a little bit. But their biggest one is the best of breed approach, the way that they think about how they're going to incorporate with other CMSs. So they focus on experience-driven commerce, and they can support any CMS. So Sitecore, Hippo, whatever is out there, they can work with that CMS. So it's incredible for a developer to just start developing and incorporate right into their enterprise. And it allows the CMS to have a full set to offer to their customers. So number 2, the thing that is really great as well for them is that the agility and the efficiency for developers. The developer can be up to speed in one day because it's only one API. So that's incredible. If you look at traditional e-commerce platforms, it takes months and months for developers to really learn the new e-commerce technology and then implement it in their enterprise CMS. So that's a huge, huge time coster for them. An example, a really great example, is they just integrated with Salesforce, and it took them 3 days. That's incredible, 3 days. And they did that exact same integration just recently, and it took 4.5 months with 3 people. So right there, you can just think about the time that people are saving. Number 3 of the differentiating factor is the omni-channel set. So they are really trying to look at all the touch points in the customer journey and not just web and mobile. What they're trying to do now, which is this great opportunity for the retail industry, to help salespeople become actually true representatives of the company. So if you walk into a store, and I really think this is the way things are going to be going, is if a salesperson is standing there with an iPad and you walk in and they know your entire shopping history, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you bought, price ranges, so they can then suggest to you what would be a good fit for your needs. And even if you left the store, they could take a snapshot of a new arrival and send it directly to you through the app. So this is just an incredible opportunity for the retail industry to actually make salespeople into true salespeople. And then the very last one, I know I'm going into the fourth, but it's the cost and the ROI. So the cost of using commercetools is zero. Well, for the licensing fees, zero licensing. You only pay for what you use, so just the usage fees. So no secrets. A developer can go onto their site right now, look at documentation, look at product instances, anything to get them started, and then they just call up commercetools when they want to go live. So incredible. And then the ROI aspect. So the cost of building and maintaining is so low that, you know, companies are saving so much money. There used to be these huge budgets for e-commerce platforms, and they get to save that now. So I know it's like I'm really excited about this platform, but it's just, I think companies need to find out how great this product really is.
So Amy, let's finish up with two questions, one about challenges for commercetools and one about growth. What are their biggest challenges for this company?
Yeah, a company like this, as they are quite new to the U.S. marketplace, just started in 2013, it's education. They really want to help people learn, companies, vendors learn that this is real. This is one API, no limitations, no complexities, low cost to start up. So it's that education barrier. And what's happening is a lot of industries are not wanting to change. They're used to the e-commerce platform, big budget, and they're used to the pain and suffering that goes with it and the support that goes with it. So I think it's just a matter of time. They're doing a really great job, but maybe not as great a job explaining how great this product really is. So I think they're right there. It's all gonna happen, just a matter of time, and they're totally aware of that.
And what about growth, Amy? Let's finish with that. Where does commercetools see themselves 3 years from now?
So their whole mission is to totally disrupt that e-commerce marketplace. They really want to be the platform of choice, but for companies that get it. They get it that there's another way to have an e-commerce platform. The companies that are the leading edge, they're innovative, they get, you know, customer experience. Those are the companies that they want to be that platform of choice for. So it's a challenge, but I think that they have a great advantage over a lot of e-commerce CMSs out there. So it's really exciting for them.
Amy, thanks for your time. Great job.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Amy Martyn from Falcon-Software and this Spotlight segment on commercetools. Stick around, more of CMS-Connected to come.
Your job is to cut through the noise. To succeed, you need to reach out to your target audiences in real time with messages that speak to them. You can't let technology get in the way of your brand. That's the spirit. First Spirit is a powerful solution that helps you effectively communicate and engage with your target audience. Get an awesome ROI. Success in the market means your message got through to the right people at the right time in the right way. And that's why you need First Spirit. Get started with digital marketing. Visit www.espirit.com now.
Welcome back to CMS Connected. Time for our CMS Insider segment where we take on the launch, you've heard this before, haven't we, of Drupal 8. Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group, our CMS Insider. All right, Scott, I mean, how long have we been hearing about the release of Drupal 8? When do we start believing this?
When should we start believing it? I think we're getting there, but we've been promised for over 4.5 years now. Or rather, it's been under works for 4.5 years. Been promised for about 3.5. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a date, November 19th. Bring us up to that date. What has the open source community been hearing up until then?
So the context here, right, which is that essentially we've had now 40 releases of version 7, right, as we've been going along here. For 3.5 years, we've we've been basically told that Drupal 8 is right around the corner. And specifically, when we launched to Alpha, which was a big undertaking to get to Alpha, we've since had 15 Alpha releases over the course of about a year. Then last year, right around this time, we launched to Beta, and we've had since 16 Beta releases of Drupal 8. And then now, about a month ago or so, that we launched Release Candidate 1. As of this taping, we're on Release Candidate 2, and I expect that there will be at least a couple of more before its launch, which is supposedly fairly imminent, as there are a few critical bugs left. So,
in fairness to the open source community, we'll believe it when we see it. In fairness to Tom Erickson and Dries and everybody over at Acquia, they've just raised more money. You know, people are evangelical about Drupal. Let's go beyond that. It's going to happen.
Sure.
It does happen.
Yep.
What does this mean for companies when it does happen?
Yeah, so there's two types of companies. There's the implications on the Acquias of the world who are dependent on, who are part of the Drupal ecosystem and make a living on it. I think it's been tough for them, quite frankly. Acquia, I know, has been looking to me about kind of why I don't necessarily have more customers finding their way onto it. And part of my reason is because it's really difficult to convince an enterprise to go shift onto a new platform when you don't know when that one that they want to basically move on to is going to be moved. And make no bones about it, this is a gigantic product movement. They're changing more than 85% of the lines of code. So it's huge. So on the folks who are doing the implementations, I think it's a fairly large imposition for them to have had this go on for so long, as their clients are really questioning them. For those who are customers of it, it's a lot. For those who are on their own, they're trying to keep up with all these releases. Every single one of those releases required an update. The migration path from one to the other wasn't always necessarily clear. Quite frankly, that's what they've really been working on. The last bit is making sure that you can migrate from some of the more popular versions. But it's been challenging for all, let's just say that.
All right, so let's talk about maybe the bigger part of this, the effect or how this will affect the open source community.
Yeah. Here's what I don't want to do, Butch, and we see this a lot. The proprietary vendors and the evangelists from them like to use a lot of FUD, and they quite frankly either are A, naive of what open source is and the various business models around it, or B, they're just frankly liars and they bend the truth a bit. But there's a lot of FUD out there about what open source is good at and is not good at. First of all, just to even say open source, there are varying business models in it. It's just a licensing agreement ultimately, but there's a lot of ways to build a business around that. We talked about Hippo earlier, we talked about a bunch of those. They're not a part of this because they're not a community-led project. They control their own destiny, their own product roadmap. It's just their license is open. However, what I am saying, though, is that in a community-led project like Drupal or like WordPress, I think what they are really good at doing is basically coming up with these lots of kind of smaller micro releases, adding features, addressing bugs that get raised, connections to other systems and integrations to other systems, new add-ons and features. So great at that, and frankly probably better than the proprietary products at it.
And good with the speed of how they do that. Yes,
exactly.
Agile, adaptable.
Their agility and speed with that I think is really good. And why? Think about it. It's because it's in the interests of the contributors to come up with those. Because I have a need to go and make use of some feature, so let me go ahead and just do it. I'll spend my time, and it doesn't have to make its way onto a roadmap. And then I can put it, now I can make it available, right? So great at those things. Not so good on turning the ship. Major big changes, because if you think about who the contributors are they going to put 10 hours towards developing something they can use for their client tomorrow? Sure they will. Are they going to put 10 hours of tens of thousands of hours that are going to be required towards a major release? Maybe a little bit less incentive to do that. And actually the group has had to come out with incentives to basically urge the community to come along, and large companies like an Acquia have had to contribute significant developers' time into this. So it's been challenging nonetheless. I don't think that it should be a black eye against open source, but I do think that it's very good at some things and less good at others. This is one of them not so good.
All right, so sum up this edition of CMS Insider. November 19th, the launch of Drupal 8.
Yep.
Again, we'll believe it when we see it, but are you overall being positive or critical of this announcement and of what might be to come?
I should be clear about that. very positive about what Drupal 8 brings. Very positive about it. It is, frankly, been long needed. When I talked to enterprise CIOs, they were looking at it and kind of doing this about Drupal before. Oh, it was built by people in their basement and PHP, whatever. Completely new framework now. Object-oriented code base. I think it is going to change the community. There's plenty of people who don't have a computer science background and can work on this, but I'm very positive on what Drupal brings into the enterprise now. I do think, though, it's been a real challenge getting to this point, and one that, frankly, hasn't for some reason really been talked about very much.
That is our CMS Insider segment. That's going to do it for this edition of CMS Connected. Nice job. Good show.
Thanks. I think it was a good show. I think it was great.
Yeah. Also, if you'd like to see any of our previous shows, go to cms-connected.com. All of the shows on demand are up there. If you want to follow the conversation and people are active as our viewers, hashtag CMS Connected. Before we go, we'd like to thank our lead sponsors, Falcon-Software and Digital Clarity Group, as always. And also like to thank Marianne Kay. And we would like to thank Amy Martyn for their contributions to the show.
Absolutely.
Final comment from you?
Yeah, I would just say one more thing is that, if folks do want to go see what's in Drupal 8, we had Dries on a couple of months ago, and that was a great conversation with him where we took a good long conversation with him about the features and capabilities of Drupal 8.
All right, so get connected.
Stay connected.
On CMS Connected, and we will see you next time on CMS Connected. Take care, everybody.